2024 has been a crazy year, thankfully in mostly good ways when it comes to anime, and life in general for Yazzie and I, which has been more or less a dream come true since we moved to Tokyo this spring. But the funny thing about relocating halfway around the planet is it can make it hard to actually keep up with anime, even when that anime is very good. So it's taken a bit more of a scramble than usual to pull together my rankings of the most exceptional anime, in one way or another, of the year. Hence why I've decided to split the lists into two videos this time, with my top 10 best and top 10 trashiest anime hitting, well, now, and the top 10 worst of the year coming right after Christmas. Why not put the trash out with that video, you ask? Because we love trash in this basement. Pay attention. And on that note, I chose to go with trashiest instead of last year's most cursed ranking, even though it rhymed so good, because I feel like we could all use a bit more shameless positivity in this transitional moment in history, and also because most of the anime curses this year were just like turbo jank, production delays with a side of turbo jank, or being on Disney Plus, which no one wants to sit through a whole list just to hear about. And the one anime that I could have pitched as super cursed if I were a liar isn't really cursed at all, just ridiculously horny and tragically misunderstood, much like its heroine. But you'll hear all about her in a minute or 50, because right now it's time for Mother's Basement's best anime of 2024, sponsored by Rosetta Stone. Every anime enjoyer considers benkyoing a bit of Nihongo at some point in their lives, but that's a lot easier said than done, and trust me, saying that last sentence with a straight face was quite difficult. But thanks to Rosetta Stone's voice recognition feature, which provides instant feedback on your pronunciation by comparing it to native speakers, at least I didn't have to worry about butchering the Japanese bits. Rosetta Stone is an industry-leading mobile and PC app that teaches you Japanese and over 20 other languages in a uniquely intuitive and immersive way that mimics how we learn as kids, bypassing your English vocabulary altogether by directly linking the new sounds you're learning with the images and concepts they represent, with lessons geared toward practical words and phrases compressed into conveniently bite-sized chunks so you can learn on your own busy schedule. Whether you're looking to travel, enjoy anime on a deeper level at home, or play some cool import video games, Rosetta Stone is a fantastic foundation to build toward that goal, as well as a fantastic Christmas present for any weebs you might know who share it. And right now, at the link in the doobly-doo, they're offering Mother's Basement viewers over 60% off an unlimited plan, including not just Japanese, but all of their language lessons for life. So click that link to give the gift of learning to someone you care about, or keep it all for your grinchy self today. My 10th place pick is a very personal one, a remake of an anime that defined my childhood and continues to shape my sense of humor and taste in anime fights to this day. Rumiko Takahashi's gender-bending, genre-defining magic martial arts rom-com, Ranma 1/2. It's the story of Ranma, a boy who turns into a girl, and Akane, a girl who hates boys, who are forced to marry each other by a panda who turns into the worst dad ever. An arrangement they might actually find they enjoy quite a bit, in spite of it all, if they could ever get over their mutual tsundere-ness, but that's easier said than done when you're being assaulted on all sides, emotionally and physically, by a menagerie of the craziest martial artists ever created by one of Japan's greatest character writers, including but not limited to Kendo Johnny Bravo, Beta Roronoa Zoro, the original yandere, the best yandere, and the dirtiest, oldest dirty old man. Every one of whom is a unique delight, except that old man. He should have stayed in his hole. At first, I was a little put off by the remake's many small differences from the anime I grew up on, but the more I've watched, the more this new take has grown on me with its cutesier, pop art-infused mixed media aesthetic and generally improved fidelity to the original manga's story and tone. The trash goblin in me does still resent the removal of Ranma's female-presenting nipples, but I suppose cupifying the character designs is an acceptable compromise to preserve the actual characters behind them, like Ranma with her total lack of female modesty, which probably wouldn't fly with international broadcasters. Because those great characters are what make this story still worth retelling today, and this new anime arguably presents them more consistently than the old one did, with all its flanderizing filler and padded out romantic progression that kinda made it seem like Akane and Ranma didn't like each other nearly as much as they actually did. On that note, though, perhaps the greatest strength of new Ranma over its predecessor is its much snappier pacing and sense of comedic timing, blazing through story arcs and fights in almost half the time the original took without ever feeling like it's rushing or missing a beat, meaning the jokes come faster and for the most part hit harder, as do the fights, even if the original did have some more impressive Sakuga. This does come with trade-offs, though. The slower pacing of the original gave it a nice, cozy vibe and let it linger longer on important emotional beats, which are further enhanced by a moodier soundtrack. Not that Kaoru Wada's new music is anything to sneeze at. It's great for comedy, action, and drama. It just doesn't quite capture the melancholic beauty of a summer sunset in Tokyo the same way. But all that really means is that both versions will have their own distinct value for fans, irrespective of whether or not you want to see a tit right now. And as someone who loves the old anime, that's everything I could have asked for from this new one. A great new version of the story that can draw in a new generation of fans without outright replacing that classic I love. As love stories go, A Sign of Affection is a whole lot less complicated than Ranma, and less violent, but no less rich in character. I've always had a fua spot for Doki Doki Shoujo romance, and this one scored a critical hit on it with a flawless and relatively fast-paced execution of the classic handsome extrovert brings cute introvert out of her shell arc, with the novel twist that said introvert, Yuki, is so introverted in the first place because she was born deaf, cut off from the world of the hearing, which plays nicely into the handsome man Itsuomi's whole thing of being a world traveler and polyglot obsessed with understanding foreign points of view. Keeping with those values, the show's portrayal of deafness and the struggles that come with it, as well as sign language and other nonverbal modes of communication, is well researched and beautifully presented, especially in terms of sound design and storyboarding. And speaking of beautiful, if you're a fan of the whole Makoto Shinkai aesthetic, you'll find a lot to love in the show's portrayal of Tokyo and other locales. While the core concept is pretty fresh, if you've seen your share of shoujo things, a lot of the tropes at play here will feel familiar. The overprotective childhood friend, the obsessive other girl, and so on. But thankfully, it doesn't draw any of them out too much, and even uses a few as springboards into other equally heartwarming romantic side stories that manage some solid payoffs in a relatively short period of time. And, just seeing those tropes play out in the context of an adult relationship with college-age characters is enough to set this apart from the rest of the genre by itself. Also, one of those side relationships I mentioned is gloriously uncomplicated, making a nice change of pace from some of the drama you'll find elsewhere. We've been truly spoiled for choice this year when it comes to romantic anime, especially in hybrids with other genres, but as far as the more straightforward examples go, A Sign of Affection slightly edged out Blue Box for me as the absolute best of the bunch. Girls Band Cry is a multimedia music and anime project from Toei Animation, spearheaded by the core creative team that made Love Live Sunshine over at Sunrise, which aims to break away from the idol-centric stories that tend to dominate the music genre. The story follows a rock band, followed by a cutesy country bumpkin who dropped out of high school due to bullying, and a former indie star who left her now huge idol band over creative differences as they figure out what they want to say through their sound and fight to keep that sound authentic in an industry that only knows how to sell what it's already selling. Now, does it feel a touch disingenuous watching members of a Toei Animation-owned Nord Keyboards, Pearl Drums, Gibson Guitars, G&L, Psycho DeRhythm, and Marshall Amps-sponsored Gorillaz-style industry plant band making passionate speeches about keeping it real and not selling out to the man over delicious, low-priced Yoshinoya beef bowls before blowing off steam with some karaoke at Big Echo Sound? No! actually, and that's a massive testament to what an incredible writer Juki Hanada is. From Princess Jellyfish to Nichijou to Sound Euphonium to Grand Belm to all the best seasons of Love Live to A Place Further Than the Universe, he is simply the best in the business at writing young women who feel at once appealing, distinctive, and real, with complex inner worlds, compelling motivations that make you want to root for them, and traits that harmonize in both fun and emotionally resonant ways with all of their castmates. And while Yorimoi is still his best script to date, Girls Band Cry comes damn close, deftly balancing a ton of laugh-out-loud humor with poignant and personal drama, and wisely taking its time introducing us to those girls, letting us get to know the core trio, developing their rapport and inside jokes alongside their musical style, so we can fully appreciate how their sound and energy changes after meeting their bassist and pianist, almost halfway through the series. To be fair, a lot of that realness also comes from the brilliant acting that brings the script to life, and I'm not just talking about the voices here. As you might have noticed, this is an almost entirely 3D animated show, and if you've been paying attention, then you've already seen what a breakthrough it is for the medium. Layering bold, expressive 2D anime poses on top of more subtly nuanced body language that's only really possible in 3D, without ever falling into that uncanny valley occupied by most things that look like this, and without resorting to the frame skipping effect that most other shows and movies use to close the gap between 2D and 3D. It also helps that the music absolutely rocks more than hard enough to feel like the authentic product of creative passion and personal pain, and credit where it's due, they still could have sold out a lot harder if they'd, say, gotten all the instruments from Yamaha instead of hitting up brands around the world that rockers this pretentious would actually use. But none of that would matter if the characters weren't so lovable and believable to begin with. After he wrote the gripping conclusion to Chainsaw Man's first season, Tatsuki Fujimoto took a step back from the weekly shonen grind to pen a trio of one-shot manga that are each masterworks in their own right. Just Listen to the Song is a thought-provoking piece about the way that works of art can take on a life of their own beyond the author's original intent once they break containment, which really stupid people unfortunately tend to read as Fujimoto saying, "The curtains are just blue, bro," but that's ironically a perfect example of what the manga's about. Goodbye Eri, meanwhile, is a beautiful tribute to his love of film in general, and cool guys walking away from explosions in particular. But the best of them, I think, was the first of them. Look Back, a love letter to manga as an art form, a chronicle of the lifelong obsession it takes to make a master illustrator, and a poignant rumination on one of Japan's most senseless recent tragedies, as well as, more broadly, how people process grief, all packed into 148 carefully crafted pages. To put it bluntly, there was no way that Kiyotaka Oshiyama and Studio Durian's film adaptation could ever match the original's brilliance. Its structure, message, and imagery are just too intrinsically tied up in the original medium. It is a near perfect manga, but thankfully they didn't try to. Instead, they aimed to capture the emotional essence of the story and preserve its themes in the new form of a love letter to animation, which, if you've seen Flip Flappers, you know is precisely what Oshiyama does best. Each of the amateur 4-coma comics that served as a linchpin of the original narrative has been transformed here into a uniquely stylized animated short within the film, allowing the star-studded animation staff to flex their own creative muscles and put a distinctive stamp on the film's emotional highs and lows, while the story in between of two young, budding artists whose mutual admiration and jealousy for each other's talents pulls them together, pushes them apart, and drives them both to reach new heights, is carried by beautifully expressive character animation and diligently detailed background background art, every moment further elevated by every heartstring-tugging note of Haruka Nakamura's excellent score. If you make art, if you love art, if you're human and you have an hour to spare, reading Look Back is one of the best ways you can possibly spend it, and watching Look Back comes impressively close to that. It's not just artists who build on each other's work and inspire each other to new heights, though. That's just as much a thing in STEM, and it's one of the many intertwining themes at the heart of Orb on the Movements of the Earth, a fictionalized, extra-dramatized account of the real generational struggle to overturn geocentric dogma and bring mankind closer to understanding our true place in the universe. The story spans across decades, following seasoned astronomers, curious students, perceptive peasants, and learned nobles alike, as each in turn is pulled in and compelled by the universal gravitation of heliocentric theory, the elegant, consistent, pure math that washes away all the contradictions piled up by centuries of scholars trying to cram our round solar system into the church's square hole. Though, of course, the church doesn't like that all too much, and the threat of inquisition looms over all who dare to pursue this heresy. Yet, despite the danger, despite seeing several people die horribly on screen, despite overwhelming opposition from most experts in their field, the cause keeps finding new champions. For some, it's a chance at glory, riches, a place in history. For others, the prospect of overturning such a core tenet about our world opens the door to challenging other entrenched beliefs, like the notion women can't be scholars, or that earthly suffering is inevitable and our only salvation lies in heaven. But beyond all of that, the same simple and powerful force calls to all of them. The inherent, undeniable, electrifying beauty of self-evident truth. The joy of learning new things that suddenly cast the same old sky you've seen 1,000 times before in a whole new light. Though, of course, that goes hand in hand with the terror of tossing away all you thought you knew. And while some do have the courage to face that head on, many others respond to it quite violently. In this way, Orb isn't just the story of one important idea at one key moment in time, but of everything that has always made our world and our species beautiful, of the thrill of curiosity, the transformative power of imagination, and the miracle of written language connecting minds across countries and continents, decades, centuries, and millennia. On paper, it sounds like just a show about some old guys reading even older books and thinking a lot, and it kind of is that, I'm not gonna lie, but I promise you it'll get you thinking even harder, and it moved me to tears more than once. While we're on the subject of ahistorical historical dramas, though, it is difficult to overstate how grateful I am that the Apothecary Diaries carried on from last year into this one, because I somehow missed it on my list for 2023, and that crime absolutely needed to be rectified. Not only is it a deeply compelling example of the court intrigue genre set in and around the palace grounds of a cleverly constructed alternate history Imperial China, but it is, without question, the best damn mystery anime I've seen in years, packing devilish little logic puzzles into each individual arc while hiding much grander mysteries in plain sight within its overarching narrative. If you're not familiar, the series follows Mao Mao, a brilliant young peasant apothecary with a passion for poisons who spends her days helping her aging father and the kindly courtesans of the imperial city's red light district until one very unfortunate day she gets a little distracted looking at herbs and then kidnapped and sold into servitude as part of the imperial harem of the palace's inner court. At first, she tries her best to keep her head down so as to likewise keep the stipend paid to her kidnappers down, which would be much higher if people knew that she could, like, read and shit. But she ends up rising through the ranks anyway when her stupid smart ass can't resist solving the mystery of why the Emperor's babies all seem to be getting sick and dying. It's the lead in their mommy's makeup, which leads to her becoming a lady-in-waiting and personal poison tester for the royal consort whose baby she saved, as well as the unofficial personal mystery-solving assistant of the court eunuch, Jinshi, a handsome and enigmatic young nobleman with a mind almost as brilliant as her own. The inner court is a place where few things are as they seem, and everyone has some private agenda, so she ends up with plenty to do in both of those roles, giving us plenty to enjoy in terms of politics, world building, and rich, multi-layered character interactions. But the Apothecary Diaries' greatest strength is without doubt Mao Mao herself, one of the sharpest-witted, most complicatedly charismatic protagonists in all of anime. A great detective, every bit the equal in skill and glaring personality faults of Sherlock Holmes himself. And with Jinshi as her sassy Watson, this anime's banter game is almost unrivaled in recent memory, with romantic tension absolutely off the charts, unconstrained by the societal taboos that keep John Locke locked in the realm of fanfiction. Though, if that's the sort of thing you're looking for... For most of its first episode, which follows a pair of rival ace pilots showboating in joint US-Japanese training exercises on Hawaii, Bang Brave, Bang Bravern seems like it's gearing up to be Top Gun with giant robots, and that's already the coolest sentence that you've heard all year. But then, the impossibly deadly aliens show up, and you realize it's actually gonna be Top Gun meets Independence Day with giant robots, and you thank the universe that you could be alive in such a glorious moment in history. But then the giant robot with his name in the title shows up, shouting out special attack names and playing his own theme song. And you realize that the English language does not contain enough cool movie references to describe how awesome this thing is really gonna be. And that's before the giant robot starts ranting to the assembled surviving military leaders of the free world about how good it feels to have the Japanese man he loves inside him, while said Japanese man is being waterboarded by the CIA. This is an anime without limits. An anime unrestrained by silly notions like common sense, good taste, or you can't waterboard a giant robot. An anime where men are otaku, women are fujoshi, and at least one giant robot pilot is literally too gay to die. What does that even mean? Watch it and find out. And while you're at it, enjoy being treated to some of the most kick-ass action scenes, funniest jokes, and craziest plot twists of the entire decade, and quite possibly century. The only reason this isn't my top contender for anime of the year is that with just 12 episodes of build-up, its biggest moments don't feel quite as epic as they deserve to. It really needed that full Gurren Lagann runtime to have that full Gurren Lagann impact, though the fact that I'm comparing it to Gurren at all should speak volumes to how awesome it is. Also, if I'm being honest, even if they're not quite as awesome, a few anime this year were perhaps a little bit better in other ways. On that note, forget mech pilots for a sec. What would you do if the aliens showed up? Not invaded, just showed up. Parked their mothership over a major metropolitan area, ate a surface-to-air missile like a fly hitting their windscreen, destroyed several city blocks with a retaliatory shockwave, and then just sort of sat there for years and years, with no effect on the rest of the city besides an uptick in tourism and an occasional train delay due to falling debris instead of guys who really don't want to go to work tomorrow. No doubt some of you would wisely get the fuck out of Tokyo with all haste, but as we do with most things that change our entire world, after the initial shock, I think most of us would just try to get on with our lives like it wasn't happening. And that's the central thesis of Dead Dead Demons Day Destruction, a critically acclaimed manga from the creator of Goodnight Punpun turned into a stunningly animated ONA from too many top-notch talents to list. In it, we watch a number of quite creatively designed characters goof around, fall in love, dream about their futures, bully each other, jockey for political power, die in UFO crashes or at their jobs due to overwork, argue on the internet and in bars about whether the national debt or the giant fucking spaceship are a more immediate concern for the nation's future, roll their eyes at roadside protesters, and generally just keep on keeping on like everything's normal and we're still alone in the universe and it's all gonna be okay. Even though, I mean, you know. But who wants to talk about that, right? So, how's work? In particular, the series focuses on a pair of quirky teenage besties, a UFO-obsessed occultist with personality to spare, and a Doraemon fangirl normie who just really wants to fuck her teacher as they prepare for a college life that probably isn't gonna last too long, considering how things have been going, in a fascinating character study that dovetails beautifully with savage social commentary about humanity at large and the modern Japanese mindset especially. My only caveat in recommending this brilliant anime is that under absolutely no circumstances, despite how it's numbered, should you watch episode 0 first, since it spoils basically everything and kinda dramatically changes the feel of the entire story for the worse. But if you can avoid that now very clearly signposted landmine and you're looking for great characters and great genre fiction, you won't find much better in this year or any other. Though, depending on your tastes, you may prefer the equally good stuff you'll find in Delicious in Dungeon, and I've always been more of a fantasy fella than a sci-fi guy myself, so naturally that's where my own tastes have landed. And taste is what Delicious in Dungeon is all about. The rich flavor of boiled mimic, the irresistible aroma of roast basilisk, the surprisingly tasty tang of tentacles and vinegar. Monster! It's what's for dinner. The unique concept of an adventuring party delving deep into a labyrinth with limited supplies by eating what they kill along the way lends itself to a uniquely biological take on your typical fantasy world building, transforming the dusty old depths of the dungeon into a vibrant, living ecosystem driven as much by macronutrients as it is magic. Though magic plays a key role too, and that grounded approach to creature creation, culture, and history makes D&D's portrayal of the concept feel particularly tangible and compelling. But I already made a whole video gushing about this, so I won't belabor that point. And of course, the series has far more to offer. Delicious in Dungeon's party members are each distinctly delightful. From the socially oblivious Laios with his enthusiastic special interest in monster munching, to the serious and studious Marcel, who would never in a million years eat a monster, but okay, maybe just one more bite of basilisk. It's basically chicken, it's fine. Then there's ornery old man Chilchuck with his professional attitude and healthy sense of paranoia. Izutsumi, the group's cat, who acts, you know, like a cat. And, of course, who could forget Best Girl Senshi?
Kakiage! We're having tempura for lunch today.
Their dynamics with each other and the many other characters in and around the dungeon are endlessly entertaining and fascinating, and the story that comes about as a result of their mutual and conflicting desires is masterfully told. Trust me, I've read the whole manga. What's more, Studio Trigger's vibrant animation adds a whole new layer of charm to what was already one of the best fantasy plots this side of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. For most of the year, this was the anime to beat in my eyes, but one did manage to top it in the end, and we'll get to that in just a sec, or 600, after rattling off a few dozen honorable mentions. This was a truly fantastic year for fantasy, and connoisseurs of strong characters, subtle politics, and deep world building ate especially well with the Spice and Wolf reboot. Not to mention Yatagarasu, The Raven Does Not Choose Its Master, a thrilling tale of court intrigue that Apothecary Diaries enjoyers are sure to appreciate. We also got some less conventional fantasy in the edgy steampunk adventure The Witch and the Beast, and the cozy contemporary slice of magic life story Tonori no Yokai-san. On the isekai adjacent side of things, The Do-Over Damsel Conquers the Dragon Prince is a rare action-packed adventure aimed at girls, while The Seventh Time Loop, the villainess enjoys a carefree life married to her worst enemy, leans more into compelling character drama, if that's what you'd like. Then, for boys, there's the over-the-top Sakuga-packed magic school battles of Wistoria, Wand and Sword, the overpowered dumbass comedy of I Parry Everything, and the impressively grounded drama and world building of Unwanted Undead Adventurer. As for actual isekai, The Wrong Way to Use Healing Magic is easily the year's strongest new example of a straightforward fight monsters save the world type story, while Reborn as an Aristocrat, I'll use my appraisal skill to rise in the world, leans more into the politically intriguing and strategic side of things. If you're looking for a solid reverse isekai, A Salad Bowl of Eccentrics brings a fantasy princess and her guardian knight into the real world for a slice of life comedy exploring the bright and dark sides of Japanese society, while Demon Lord 2099 brings a defeated demon lord into a dystopian cyberpunk future where his only real job prospect is becoming a retro gaming live streamer. As for anime based on actual games, Nier Automata version 1.1a was a very impressive adaptation overall, well worth the many waits that viewers had to endure as it was delayed again and again throughout the year, and any fellow fans of Juki Hanada's script writing will also want to check out Sakuna of Rice and Ruin, a gorgeously animated retelling of that indie fantasy farming sim gem. If you like the look of that show, you might also appreciate Mayonaka Punch, a zany original anime from the same production studio about a canceled YouTuber who enlists the help of a crazy lesbian vampire to rebuild her career at the cost of all her blood once they reach 1 million subs. Original anime tend to be where you find fun, creative, visually inventive concepts like that, and they don't get much more fun or creative than Train to the End of the World, a surreal post-apocalyptic odyssey sponsored by the Cebu Railway Company about a group of girls trying to traverse a broken world torn apart by the reality warping power of 7G Wi-Fi. Negative Positive Angler is a little less fun, at least for its protagonist, a college-aged washout who turns to fly fishing as a distraction from his crippling gambling debts and brain cancer, though if you have a healthy sense of schadenfreude, it should still be fun for you. Speaking of fun stuff though, if you like hyped up old school battle anime like Scryed or Kill la Kill, the Kickstarter funded Mecha Ude Mechanical Arms is a proper blast from the past with wonderful characters and highly stylized, high-impact animation. As for new school battle anime, Shonen Jump has given us plenty of great ones this year. Kaiju number 8 offered a fun Hiroaka-style underdog story aimed at a more working-age crowd, while The Elusive Samurai is a fascinating, thrilling, and stunningly animated piece of historical fiction. Then there's Undead Unluck, a deeply underrated series with off-the-wall world building and hands down the most creative power system Jump has had in years, which unfortunately got buried in the Disney Plus hole. That was also the tragic fate of the excellent non-Jump shonen battle series Go Go Loser Ranger, a subversive Sentai parody about an anonymous evil goon trying to take down a corrupt squad of Power Rangers. Then, on the less fantastical side of shonen fightin' type stuff, we have Windbreaker, a story of delinquents with hearts of gold fighting to protect their town from ne'er-do-wells. Of course, there is more to shonen than just battles, like romance and sports, both of which you'll find in abundance in Blue Box, a gorgeous and pulse-pounding new high school sports drama from Shonen Jump. If you're looking for a more mature and tragic love story, I also highly recommend Sumasho, about a reincarnated dead mom who comes back to help her husband and daughter heal in the body of a 10-year-old girl. Or, if you want a less heterosexual rom drama, Yuri enjoyers will enjoy Whisper Me a Love Song, while yaoi aficionados should definitely check out Twilight Out of Focus. We also have some great gay options in the romantic comedy department. Cherry Magic, 30 Years of Virginity Can Make You a Wizard, tells the story of a very lonely office worker who's rewarded for 30 years of involuntary celibacy with the power to read minds, including that of the senpai who's in love with him. And on that note, Senpai is an Otoko Noko places a cross-dressing cutie at the fulcrum of one of the most hilariously chaotic love triangles you will ever see. How I Attended an All-Guys Mixer, on the other hand, isn't nearly as gay as it seems. Those handsome fellas are actually handsome cross-dressing ladies who work at a host bar, which proves hilariously confusing for the himbos they end up dating. Almost as confusing as the titular heroine of Alya Sometimes Hides Her Feelings in Russian thinks she's being when she doesn't realize that the boy she keeps telling about her secret crush on him also happens to be fluent in Russian. And in a funny coincidence, the fake couple from 365 Days to the Wedding is gonna be able to see Russia from their window if their fake engagement doesn't stop their boss from sending them to Alaska. If you want some calm without the rom, we had a few good ones of them this year too, particularly the absurdist romp that was My Dear Friend Nokotan. And for the adults out there looking for something a little more relatable, VTuber Legend is a hilarious slice of life thing about a burned out 20-something who finally makes her VTubing dreams come true after she unwittingly leaves her webcam on and gets absolutely plastered. And while we're on that subject, I think the adults out there will also appreciate the hard-boiled blend of action and comedy in The Fable, the silly high-stakes business shenanigans of Trillion Game, and the contemplative, character-focused storytelling of Bartender Glass of God. Whew, damn, that was a lot of honorable mentions, perhaps too many. But while all of those are good in their own way, as are a few others I left out for the trashy half of this video, the best anime of 2024 is Dandadan. If Shonen Jump's anime and manga empire is built on the back of classic comfort food, then their latest hit, Yukinobu Tatsu's Dandadan, is an exciting new type of fusion cuisine. Sure, it features more than a hint of that familiar shonen battle flavor, but spiced up with a dash of horror, a sprinkle of sci-fi, and all blended masterfully with an equal portion of shoujo-inspired romantic comedy. Put that recipe in the hands of the master anime chefs at Science Saru, and baby, you got a stew going. What's really impressive about Dandadan isn't how exciting it manages to make its action, built on the simple yet endlessly fun premise of ghosts versus cryptids versus aliens, nor how richly it renders its massive cast of lovable assholes, making them feel like real people with real hair-trigger emotions, crippling social anxiety, and terminal main character syndrome that you could really see yourself hanging out with in real life, and their anxiety-inducing relationships. It's how harmoniously it manages to balance those two seemingly disparate flavors. Its gradual romantic development and occasional explosive payoffs feel like satisfying rewards after hard-won fights, making the downtime between action scenes feel just as entertaining and vital as the supernatural brawls. And right when the hilariously hormonal self-consciousness and ridiculously awkward misunderstandings threaten to wear a little thin, the Loch Ness Monster will show up, spitting laser beams at people and transform the character's quiet inner conflicts into something quite a bit louder and more external. With each new battle delving into some new facet of occultism, high-concept science fiction, or deep-cut anime and tokusatsu references, often all at the same time. Thanks to this great variety, Dandadan's able to keep up an unrelenting pace from beat to beat and arc to arc without feeling nearly as relentless as, say, JJK or Demon Slayer, and still keep the viewer on their toes, never sure when one side of the story is about to give way to the other, but also never bored. Whether you're laughing your ass off at some testicle-centric Muppet antics, crying your eyes out over the fate of some character you thought was an irredeemable jerk just an episode or two ago, or glued to the edge of your seat by a fight that seamlessly marries the hype of a climactic DBZ brawl to the madcap classical music-fueled insanity of peak Looney Tunes. I tell ya, nothing hits quite like that 1-2 punch of Science Saru animation and Kensuke Ushio music. And it's the perfect pairing to adapt Dandadan in particular, because they're just as adept with slice-of-life drama and comedy as they are action. This is an anime firing on all cylinders based on a manga that was already absolutely peak. A rip-roaring action comedy romp that's a ton of fun to watch while also having quite a bit to say. Like Zom 100 and Freerin last year, who only isn't on this list because I already gave her flowers back then, Dandadan is simply the complete anime package. A perfect encapsulation of everything that makes this the greatest modern art form besides Muppets, and everything that keeps me coming back to anime year after year. Well, almost everything. We also have a big old trash pile to dive into after all. But before we do, you might have noticed a distinct lack of sequels on the above list, and that's because I decided not to put them there. Most of you use these videos as recommendation lists for good shit to watch after all, and committing to multiple seasons just to get to the stuff I'm gushing about is a big ask, so yeah, I left them out. But 2024 has featured quite a few truly great sequels and continuations, including some straight-up Anime of the Year contenders that deserve recognition in their own right, so we're gonna take a sec now to recognize them. And also recognize the fact that I really need to get around to watching Urusei Yatsura, Kingdom, and Kinnikuman Perfect Origin Arc, as well as catching up and finishing Danmachi, Dangers in My Heart, and Hibike Euphonium, all of which I have it on very good authority were great this year. Unfortunately, I'm just one man who cannot watch all of everything, even when I'm not busy moving to Japan, but rest assured, they are on my radar, and they will get done at some point. The list is endless. As for what I am caught up on, Shangri-La Frontiers dived even deeper into its titular full dive game, while expanding on the world of other cool, if slightly busted, fake VR games that surrounds it, and that's been just a ton of fun to watch, just like the last season. Oshinoko Season 2 offered a fascinating glimpse into the adaptation process and the world of 2.5D stage plays, which, by the way, I am very excited to see my first one of in person this month, while also escalating the character drama to new heights. It continues to be one of the best directed, most transformative adaptations on TV today, and maybe it's a bit of a shame where the manga's going, but that doesn't make the anime any less good. Speaking of shows that speak to my inner theater kid, Beastar's final season part 1 presents quite possibly the most gripping arc of its story so far, which is saying a lot, pushing the characters even further past their limits and outside their relationship comfort zones, while getting to the real heart of its world's most pressing problems. And, of course, Studio Orange's CGI has never looked slicker. ReZero Season 3 and Mushoku Tensei Season 2 Part 2 dropped me back into two of my favorite fantasy worlds and gave me a chance to catch up with some of the best written characters in the whole isekai genre, which I absolutely cherished. Seeing Rudius finally reunite and get reacquainted with his broken family after so much time away hit really hard, especially at the end. On the other hand, with ReZero on a mid-season break, it's hard to say how hard its ending will hit, but the half season we have seen so far, which has seen Subaru accomplish quite a lot and distinguish himself as a true hero of the people without really relying on return by death at all, has felt like an intensely satisfying culmination of his whole character arc throughout the series. If I had to pick the absolute best sequel of the year, though, I'd either give it to Dragon Ball Daima, Toriyama's last hurrah, which has brought a sorely needed sense of humor and adventure back to the franchise, along with some gorgeously animated fights, delightful new villains, and even a few clever new bits of lore, or Bleach Thousand Year Blood War: The Conflict, which captures the cinematicism of the original manga better than any adaptation to date and does full justice to the climactic fights and deep lore reveals of the series' final arc. Arguably, even fuller justice than the burned out Kubo was able to do at the end of the manga's run. Shit's hype. Hyper than I ever thought a Bleach anime could be. And to be clear, you don't have to sit through the much less hype parts of the original anime with all their bullshit and filler and weird Ichiruki shipping dynamics to get there. Just read the manga. It's a really good manga. Also, I'm not entirely sure how to classify it because it's not exactly a sequel, but One Piece Fan Letter offers a brilliant, if brief, glimpse into the world of One Piece through the eyes of ordinary people who don't have the strength to change it on their own, each one a fan of a different Straw Hat whose life is changed in some way the day they reunite after the time skip. It'll basically be incomprehensible to anyone who's not a fan themselves, but if you are, it's easily one of the most moving and beautiful anime things of the year. Now, I think that's about everything.
Aren't you forgetting something? We forgot the splatter shot in Canada.
Ah, right. Thanks for reminding me. It's not exactly a sequel either, since the series has been running weekly for several years now, but we got into Chikawa recently. A cutesy little 1-minute seinen mascot anime with a lot of low-key f***ed up lore hidden just beneath its surface, and its currently running time loop arc is a real banger, as were a lot of other bits throughout the last year. Maybe we'll do a second channel video about why it's so good at some point. And last, but certainly not least, Ari Ferretta and especially Konosuba's third seasons have both served as hilarious reminders of why I fucking love trash anime, with respectively their off-brand Power Rangers aided magic minigun equipped slave revolt storyline and just about everything about Darkness's arc in particular, Kazuma's new Princess Emoto, his brief stint as a phantom thief, the whole storyline about cleaning up after Aqua's potentially world-ending cheat item fuck-ups. It inspired a whole-ass video essay out of me that you might have missed this past summer. In fact, you probably did. It's one of my least viewed videos of the year, but you can go check that out now. I'm really proud of it. A little sad that it didn't get as many views as I thought it would. But now it's time to talk about the trashiest new anime of 2024, starting with far and away its most popular new piece of trash. Solo Leveling starts off on a very strong, striking note by putting its hero through the absolute ringer from the word go, impressing upon him with severe brutality how being weak makes him disposable to most of his dungeon-delving co-workers, and when the chips are down, all he can do, even for the ones who do actually care about him, is dispose of himself to buy them a little time. But it also counterbalances that with the intriguing idea that because he's the weakest guy, he might be better at assessing danger and finding clever ways out of it than most of his stronger contemporaries. What's more, the show's contemporary fantasy setting, where dungeon portals randomly appear in real-world cities, offering danger and riches to those with the skill to conquer them, contrasts that medieval brutality against the all-too-mundane, modern savagery of South Korean capitalism in a way that makes it feel like it's building into something more than your typical disposable wish fulfillment thing. Like it's really gonna put its hero through his paces, make him think outside the box, and maybe even have something to say. Then Sung Jin-woo becomes the only guy ever in the history of the world who can level up, and goes from being the virgin meme to the Chad meme in like a week flat, going on to effortlessly raffle stomp everything that even thinks about killing him for the rest of all time. Except the one time that he doesn't, but then that's also the one time that he conveniently forgot to do his daily push-ups, so he gets sent to the didn't do your push-ups dimension right before he dies, where he's already out-leveled all the giant worms that eat you for not doing your push-ups, so he kills a bunch of those for like 8 hours and levels up and heals up a bunch and comes back to raffle stomp all the things that almost raffle stomped him. The end. That's the closest the show comes to featuring anything resembling drama or strategy after episode 1. And world building? Forget about it. Time spent exploring contemporary fantasy, politics, and economics is time not spent in a dungeon murderizing monsters and sometimes people, but in a completely morally ambiguous way, you fucking Poindexter. So you're gonna sit down, turn your brain off, eat the popcorn action fluff, and like it. And you know what? I did kind of like it, because that popcorn was piping hot, golden yellow, and glazed in butter, and there was not one single kernel waiting for me at the bottom of the bag. Sure, from a narrative perspective, I could have just watched 5 straight hours of a guy jerking off with one hand and doing bicep curls in the other while South Korean finance news plays on a very quiet TV in the background and had the exact same intellectual experience, but look at how fucking cool he looked when he did that fucking thing with the sword, bro! And did you hear when Sawano dropped the fuck out of that shit? Like, the music was all dun, 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 dun. And then it was all okay, look, I don't know how to make even more intense piano noises with my mouth while simultaneously belting out random English gibberish, but you get the point. Sometimes, after a long day, all you want to do is sit down and not think at all about some disposable RPG-esque fantasy action nonsense for half an hour. And solo leveling is basically the platonic ideal of that. To the point that every other thing remotely like it could just pack up and go home, but they won't, because there are millions of more dollars to be made just from scooping that popcorn back up off the theater floor and reheating it. And you know what? Some of them are going to turn it into caramel corn or something even more special than that, and I'm fucking here for it. So it was with SAO, so it is with this, so it will be with the next thing and the thing after that. For a long stretch of my YouTube career, I fought against this, thought myself above it, but I am happier having embraced the primo slop. But let's make one thing clear. Given the choice, I am always gonna take the weird, spicy, flavored popcorn first, like I was reincarnated as the seventh prince so I can take my time perfecting my magical ability. Which is one of them long-ass light novel titles that actually doesn't describe the show all that accurately in this case, because reborn peasant magic nerd turned Prince Lloyd's oddly voluptuous thighs haven't even grown out of his Shota shorts by the time he becomes the most powerful wizard on the planet, makes an almighty sealed demon his fluffy little mascot bitch, and pulls an entire harem's worth of almost equally OP fantasy baddies. But that doesn't make it any less fun to watch him absolutely wipe the floor with every ancient evil lich and body-snatching baboon demon that so much as looks at him funny by stacking up stunningly animated god-tier spells to quantities and power levels as yet unimagined by mortal or immortal minds. Or when he makes himself even more ridiculously overpowered by learning to layer Qigong martial arts and weapon enchantment skills on top of that magic that was already strong enough to make archlords of the underworld cry for their mommies. If you want to switch your brain off and watch someone with an actual personality raffle stomp every anime that comes his way, and see some cute anime girls with actual personalities, you know, on top of all their personalities, kick some booty to boot, Seventh Prince is a rollicking good time. Of course, trash anime isn't just about unrealistic fantasies and magical worlds. You can have plenty of those right here on Earth, like the premise of 2.5D Seduction. The story of a nerdy, awkward anime club senpai who finds his prejudice against 3D women challenged when his nerdy, awkward kohai decides that he's the only one who could possibly help her fulfill her lifelong dream of taking pretty much naked cosplay photos of his all-time favorite waifu from the obscure, insanely horny mid-2000s fantasy adventure series that he's been obsessed with ever since he was way too young to watch it. A situation that gets a little complicated when the childhood friend he rejected for being too 3D and not that waifu transfers into their school and starts taking sexy photos with them as the other waifu from that anime. And by complicated, I mean that they're not allowed to publish those photos because that would violate the childhood friend's non-compete clause as a professional famous sexy magazine model, which is a job that she only took because she thought it might maybe make him notice her one day. Also, their teacher does sexy cosplay too. Despite all of that and a whole lot of other stuff, especially in the manga, 2.5D Seduction is at its heart a surprisingly wholesome story about following your passions and finding community with those who share them, which is why it's not higher in these rankings. Even Makein, Too Many Losing Heroines, trumps it in terms of raw trashiness, which honestly I didn't expect going in, considering its artfully cinematic presentation and a premise that seems like it wouldn't lend itself to nearly that many fan service scenes. I mean, if you just say it out loud, self-proclaimed background character and tap water connoisseur inadvertently befriends the third wheel rejects of 3 other love stories around his school doesn't exactly sound like all that horny a hook, but when one of those unfortunate other guy's childhood friends is a ditzy jock with no sense of modesty and an apparent allergy to clothes, and also the school nurse is a low-key sexual predator who wants to film students fucking, well, stuff happens. And despite showing less skin overall than a lot of the entries further down this list, and even the one above it, Makein animates that stuff with a greater fidelity and attention to anatomical detail than damn near any other piece of trash this year. Besides, maybe Alya sometimes hides her feelings in Russian, but Makein ended up being far and away my personal favorite piece of trash this year, and my 11th favorite anime overall. Plus, I'm more of a tummy guy than a feet dude, so this is what's on the list. Though, honestly, what I love about it has a lot more to do with its hilariously vibrant cast of characters, the razor-sharp wit of its dialogue, and the aforementioned cinematic quality of the animation than any of that stuff. A quality that's put to especially great use with its most standout character, the first losing heroine, Anna, a delightful little ball of depression and manic energy who's entertaining enough to carry the entire series by herself.
うちのお父さんのバーベキュー熱を舐めてるの。私が帰るまでランチまでだけ焼き続けるんだから。
Makein is, in many ways, a love letter to the trashy love stories of anime and its original genre, light novels. One that revels both in poking fun at the many, many tropes of the genre and the unironic fun of occasionally playing them straight. It's so darn delightful, I couldn't help sneaking it into this spot on the list for an unofficial top 11th pick, but rest assured, it's trashy enough to earn this spot anyway. If that's not enough trashy romantic wish fulfillment for you, though, Love is Indivisible by Twins is about one nerdy guy with 2 insanely hot childhood friends, one a fellow nerd and one a sporty popular girl, who just so happen to be in love with him and also twin sisters. Though that's kind of where the wish fulfillment part ends, because they also both happen to be fucking crazy. And not the fun, cute anime girl kind of crazy like Anna. We're talking 6 figures worth of therapy minimum. At first, it's the slightly older, much more athletic twin who asks him out, and they have quite a bit of fun going out for a while. But then she starts feeling guilty for scooping him out from under her sister, whom she's pretty sure is gonna die alone if she can't date that specific guy. So one night she decides to dump him out of nowhere, even though everything's going great, and demand that he instantly go f*** the nerdy twin instead, who's understandably a little bit offended by the insinuation that she needed that assist, but also, like, not gonna say no to that. And meanwhile, the pair of balls in the little game they're playing just gets less and less decisive about who he wants to be with, as he's yanked in 2 directions at once by his heart and his head. Not that one. And basically it's just 12 straight episodes of stupid horny teenagers f***ing each other up emotionally, with much smarter character writing and more cinematic direction than you'd probably expect, though nowhere near what you'd get in Makein. If you enjoy moderately toxic relationship drama, though, it's definitely worth a watch. On the other hand, if you prefer your drama extremely toxic and your stupid horny teenagers capable of as much physical harm as emotional, Yakuza Fiancé will probably be more your ceremonial cup of sake. As the title suggests, it's the story of a boy and girl from 2 rival Yakuza clans who get set up for an arranged marriage that'll either help settle their differences for good or make them much, much worse. The odds of the latter outcome seem increasingly likely after he tells her she's too darn boring for him and can go sell her body for all he cares, prompting her to drop her nice girl act, sell a kidney just to make a point, and vow to make him fall in love with her so she can break his heart and ruin his life. Which is fine by him, because ruin your life crazy is his fetish, and nothing less than a 5-figure therapy bill's gonna get him out of bed. So, in short order, he is eaten out of her hand.
Honestly, whatever, I'm down for whatever. We could go see a movie, we could get lunch, we could kill someone. Or, the apple orchard?
Though being a very bad boy and all, that doesn't stop him from eating out of some other girl's other things, even though he feels like murdering any other guy who so much as looks at her, and basically it gets real messy real fast, both in terms of emotions and all the blood they get all over the place. Which feels like it should be the perfect segue into Vampire Dormitory, but most of the dark, brooding pretty boys in that not quite a reverse harem type thing are way too weenie for that sort of carnage. In fact, the main one, Ruka, is such a weenie around girls in particular that he decides to pick up the prettiest homeless boy he can find off the street and put him up in his fancy private school dorm room just to practice sucking his blood so that maybe he can one day suck the blood of his one true magically destined heterosexual love to become a real vampire lord. Little does he know, however, that Mito, the pretty orphan boy, is in fact a pretty orphan girl who only pretends to be a boy because and now that she's finally getting a fancy education at an all-boys school and also enjoying stable employment at the Pretty Boy Cafe where all the rich vampire weenies and their friends work, and also she knows that he's too much of a weenie to ever deal with her boobs and stuff, she has to pretend to be a boy even harder than ever, even when he starts catching feelings for her that he thinks he's not allowed to have because real vampires only get one zing ever, and it can't be a gay zing. Which, of course, leaves her open to another, even broodinger half-vampire boy catching feelings he's a lot more open to, lighting a fire under the first boy's ass, which lights a fire under his ass, and then they start punching walls and stuff, and it's a whole big mess that's a lot of fun. This show is what would happen if Vampire Knight got hit on the head with a really big rock and started thinking it was Oron High School Host Club, and I can't say that I didn't enjoy every last minute I watched of it. Don't you worry though, boys. We've got a classically trashy harem anime on the list for you too, in Tales of Wedding Rings, which follows a generic anime pretty boy as he follows his generic anime childhood friend back through the generic isekai portal that it turns out she originally came from, just in time to stop her from marrying the generic fantasy prince that she was betrothed to as part of a generic fantasy prophecy about a generic demon king whose generic evil servants can only be defeated by a generic destined hero empowered by 5 magic rings with generic elemental attributes, which, in a slightly non-generic twist, turn out to be wedding rings. Though you might have guessed that from the title, just like he might have guessed that she was a secret princess from her name, Princess, but in Japanese. One of many handy things you can learn from Rosetta Stone today. Anyway, each of those rings is guarded by the princess of a different generic fantasy race, so now, in order to save the world, he's got to take his new wife and her generic wizard advisor pal and go on an epic journey to his way through the whole Tolkien legendarium, plus also cat girls and dragon girls. Tales of Wedding Rings may not have much in the way of original ideas, but it does have what really matters. A whole bunch of uncensored titties all over the place, plus a whole harem that's actually DTF. Though, since what they're down for is mostly vanilla stuff, that's not quite enough to put it over my second place harem type thing. Remember how I called solo leveling the platonic ideal of pseudo-isekai action schlock? Well, Chain Soldier, or Mato Seihei no Slave, is that without the platonic part. It's even got the same basic premise of monster portals popping up all over the place and people being given superpowers to go deal with them, though with the caveat that in this world, only busty teenage girls get those superpowers. However, our protagonist, Yuki Wakura, is not an exception to that rule. He's just a regular dude who greatly admires the brave warrior women who protect the world from evil and hopes he can one day support one of them as a capable and doting house husband. But after he falls into one of those portals one day and meets Commander Uzen, a particularly magically gifted Dami-Mami who knows how to step on him just right, he finds a new way he can help in that fight by transforming into her magically buffed up Slave Hulk and punching the monsters himself. Though in exchange for that awesome power, she has to pay a terrible price of doing whatever his subconscious most wants her to do to or with him, mostly to, in that specific moment, which also helps him discover quite a lot of things about himself, like he's into ball stomping. He still gets to put those house husband skills to good use as the regular cooking and cleaning type slave of her hot girl superhero squad in his off hours, though as you might expect if you've seen any anime like this before, those duties are quickly overtaken by his much more important duty to get smushed between the Pym particle powered thighs of the squad's shape-shifting giantess, stepped on in a gentler, slightly different way by the one with the power to copy other powers, and so on and so forth, including other hot girl superheroes from other hot girl superhero squads showing up to distract him by trying to bone him. Then on top of that, the fight against the monsters suddenly becomes much more complicated when he discovers that his own superpowered sister has been transformed into a monster girl somehow, and is now hell-bent on making him break Rule D at any cost, and also taking over the world by making more monster girls or something. Actually, I don't want to downplay it by joking around. Chain Soldier has a pretty interesting story and really good fights. Way better than you might expect from something with such a strong plot, though about what you'd expect if you're familiar with the mangaka's other thing, Akame ga Kill. Though as far as trash goes, it is still ultimately beaten by our first place finisher, which puts no separation between its sex and violence. On a basic conceptual level, gushing over magical girls is a formulaic Monster of the Week style magical girl anime in the vein of Precure or Sailor Moon, with the unique twist that we follow the villain, who happens to be a classmate of the heroines and a big fan of their work until she gets roped into the monster summoning gig by this deviously adorable mascot. And on top of that, there's the even more unique twist that instead of fight scenes, every episode culminates in an increasingly kinky hentai scene, starring, as magical girl anime tends to, a group of mostly innocent middle schoolers, which is the sort of anime thing that makes a lot of people instantly turn tail and run, and some condemn literally all anime as pornographic slop for freaks. To the former group, I say, you know what? Fair. It's definitely not a show for everyone, and the things it's about should make you feel uncomfortable. Most of them anyway. But as for the latter, this is actually a perfect example of why that reactionary mindset toward art is so backwards and limiting and wrong, and why I think anime's willingness to be trashy and weird in ways that make most people uncomfortable is worth celebrating and preserving, even if a lot of the other stuff produced by it is just needlessly and irredeemably gross. Gushing over magical girls, though, is a rich, characterful story about a repressed, pubescent lesbian sadist discovering her true self by confronting the most taboo aspects of her sexuality, and in the process, finding love and helping several of her peers come out of their shells as well, and also just come. And it is able to directly and honestly address the real nuances of those uncomfortable and taboo ideas in ways that no story that's not about a young woman working through her puberty by tying other young women up and dripping hot wax all over them ever could. It's an anime driven by deep, dynamic, fascinatingly up characters with audacious laugh-out-loud comedy interspersed with shockingly wholesome slice-of-life bits, plus genuinely interesting themes and a hardcore love for the magical girl genre. If you can bring yourself to watch it, you'll find that while it can be very hard to watch, it's equally difficult to look away. Not just campily entertaining, but bizarrely compelling in a manner I've seen win over even some of its most ardent haters. Only some, though. Again, it is definitely not an anime for everyone or even most people, and you should not trust anyone who recommends it sight unseen without a whole bunch of asterisks. But what it is an anime with something interesting and unusual to say, that is, something besides,
I'm horny.
which it absolutely could not say in any less trashy way. And while it may not be my personal favorite piece of trash for this year, that is exactly what I keep coming back to anime trash for. With all that said, I would really appreciate it if you came back after Christmas to see my list of the worst anime of 2024, or just click the thing on screen over here now if you're watching this then when it's out already. And of course, I'm very grateful to you already for having sat through both these lists of the good shit, sticking with me for this year and all the past ones, and making our dream of living in Japan possible. I'm Geoff Thew, that guy with the good anime hookup, wishing you happy holidays.